Why does it seem like there's an obsession with whether or not Final Fantasy XVI is an RPG? Well, think of it this way. You go to the store, you want to buy some apples. The shopkeeper says, I have a new variety of apple for you. You say, cool, give me some of those apples. And he gives you an orange. And it's the best orange you've ever tasted, but you still don't have any apples. Or you go to the pharmacy and you get some pills to get rid of your headache. And you take those pills and your foot fungus goes away, but now you still have a headache. There was this social contract that Square Enix had with the gaming populace that said numbered Final Fantasies always had something in common. While they always experimented, they weren't always turn-based, they weren't always real-time, they were always at their core RPGs. The key points that made up Final Fantasy were 1, graphical excellence, 2, a commitment to storytelling, and 3, a commitment to complex and interesting role-playing style systems that play off of each other. And in even the most action-based Final Fantasies, like, say, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth or Final Fantasy XV, there were still a lot of these RPG systems. Like, there were status effects, there were lots of different types of accessories that changed the fundamental way that you play. There were elemental effects. Final Fantasy XV had its cooking effects. And it was commonly understood that if you deviated from that formula enough, you became a Final Fantasy spin-off, not a numbered title. Now, the first time that something like this happened, it was with Final Fantasy XI when we got an MMO. And while that ruffled a lot of people's feathers, we all kind of agreed that the mechanics of Final Fantasy XI and later Final Fantasy XIV were still very deep and still had a lot of interplay, and so even though you were playing online, they still felt like a Final Fantasy. They still felt like they had that core third tentpole. The reason why people care is that Final Fantasy XVI does not have that third tentpole. Its equipment management is very light. The only thing you really have to manage is, are your numbers higher? You don't manage any members of your party. You only get 4 new abilities per new icon. They're usually unlockable right from the start. They don't interact meaningfully with any enemy types or anything like that. You don't have to change them from battle to battle. You just equip your favorite abilities and go. Now, that doesn't make the game bad. It's not a bad game. But what it does mean is that the shorthand for what Final Fantasy stood for has now changed. Up until now, even if you didn't know what a Final Fantasy was about, you could expect it to have certain similarities with other Final Fantasies. And now one of those similarities is gone. Again, that's not a bad thing, but it does mean that the people who went to Final Fantasy for that third tentpole, for interesting and interactive RPG systems, are not going to be satisfied with Final Fantasy XVI. Which means that for those people, they can't necessarily say, I am a Final Fantasy fan anymore. They have to judge each game a little bit more critically on an individual basis, and that's fine. But, like, imagine if Final Fantasy XVII was a baseball game. It could be the best baseball game in existence, and I'll be happy for the people who like baseball games. But I don't like baseball games, and that means it's going to change what Final Fantasy means to me.